So now I'm removing that from the machine. I'm gonna go ahead and trim away the excess stabilizer. I don't necessarily need to rinse out all of the stabilizer. I love to use these embroidery scissors. You'll notice how they're curved. It really helps me. I can hold these type of scissors a little bit better. There we go. So I'm just trimming away the excess. So whatever applique or scissors that you have that are your favorite, you might want to grab those applique scissors and trim away the excess. So I'm not cutting any of the strips, just the stabilizer. Almost finished. There we go. Alright, so now we have it all trimmed away. It's time to take it out of the hoop. And so we're going to go ahead and we're going to dissolve away that stabilizer. So whenever I do a project where I'm using that dissolve away stabilizer, I don't ever want to wash it down my sink, because if you rinse a lot of water-soluble stabilizer out in your sink, you might have a problem. Your sink might stop up. So I have gotten just a baking dish and I filled it with water, and I'm just placing the stocking in it face down, and I'm just going to kind of maybe rubbing it a little bit to kind of help that stabilizer start dissolving. Again, I'm just kind of rub on the fabric and on the stabilizer, so it's going to start really kind of just disintegrating into the water. And there we go. So now I'll flip it back and I'll do the other side. Kind of rub that around, kind of all that stabilizer loosened up and out of there. So now I'm just going to roll it up. Just kind of give it a delicate squeeze. Well, maybe not so delicate. It's nice and secure, so it's not going anywhere. And then I just grabbed a couple of towels and laid it on my table, and then laid the piece out and just kind of rubbed just kind of positioned the strips and laid it out to where it can kind of start drying. So there we go. Nice and a little darker there because it's wet. Okay, so now let's go back into the embroidery side of our machine. We'll go back to Around the World. Yes, you guessed it. We're going back after that stocking. We'll go ahead and touch Set, and then I'm going to touch Edit, and I'm going to do the mirror image of the stocking. And so we'll touch Embroidery in that lower right hand corner. So now we're going to work on the back of the stocking, and that's why it is really important to mirror image that stocking. And that was the little icon where you saw two triangles side by side. So I've hooped another layer of that no show mesh cutaway stabilizer, hooped it again into that 9.5 by 14 inch frame, loaded into the machine. I have thread in the machine already, so we're going to just go ahead and lower that presser foot, and we're going to once again stitch that placement stitch for that stocking. Once we get the stocking, the placement stitch stitched, we are going to start building the back of our stocking, and it's going to go a lot faster than the front, but you know the front needs to pack a punch, so we had to do that little bit of a creative expression on the front of our stocking. So now I'm just taking a layer of batting. I didn't want to have a real thick batting, so this is a nice cotton batting, and it was actually something that I had in my sewing studio. I had it left over from a previous project. So you'll notice that I just kind of angled it. It was okay. It did not have to be straight in the hoop. So I just angled the stabilizer to where it was covering all of the area of the stitch out, the placement stitch for the stocking. And now I'm taking the fabric. See that pretty little, they're all ornaments. They're little bitty small ornaments. And now I'm going to make sure that when I lay that fabric in the hoop, I'm laying those ornaments right side up, okay? You're seeing the right side of the fabric, and also that the direction of the little ornaments, the top of the ornaments are going to be towards the top of the stocking. And so now I just use that placement stitch to tack down the fabric, the batting, and it's going to grab a hold of the stabilizer. So now we're going to go back into embroidery. We're going into the pocket of the machine now, in the memory pocket, and you'll notice in the upper left hand corner there is my stocking. We're going to touch embroidery. We're going to go ahead and do edit, and once again I'm going to mirror image that stippling, so we didn't have to create the stippling all over again because we saved it previously. So now I'm just going to go ahead and change my thread, and I used a white thread on this fabric. Again, you decide whatever color thread's going to match with whatever fabrics you've chosen, and we're going to create a stippling pattern. We're going to stitch it right on top of the fabric and the batting and the stabilizer. And so the back of our stocking is going to have a pretty, just a really pretty stipple stitch. So again, I'll let you just kind of see that stitch. Parts of the video goes really fast because whenever I created this tutorial, it was for one of my classes where I was creating it and using it to show the class how to create this, and so I always do try to speed things up so it goes a lot faster, so we're not watching. We have lots of time to do other things because there's always so many things I love to show everyone whenever I come into a store and a class. So here we go. It's finished up. There we go. It's actually stitched the whole thing. How pretty is that? See the little top of the little ornaments? There we go. Fast and easy. So now, let's see, did I take, yep, I took it. I took it out of the hoop, absolutely. I want to make sure before I tell you that. So now what I'm doing here is I'm just going to measure the top of the stocking. So I want to see how wide it is. And we'll talk about that in just a minute whenever we start creating our the little topper, the little cuff. So now I've changed over to my 8 by 12 hoop, okay? And I've hooped it with no-show mesh. I'm going into my settings page. I switched it back over to inches, and you'll notice that I'm setting my embroidery frame display to 12 by 8 because now I'm using that smaller hoop. And so I want to have the outline on the workspace because I'm going to create the cuffs in the hoop. I'm going into IQ, I'm going into my shapes key, and I'm going to choose that top little square, and I'm going to touch size, and you'll notice that I can see the sizing in that upper right hand corner. So I'm going to use the arrows, and I'm going to shrink it in height to where it is, let's see how high, probably about 4 inches is what I'm guessing I did. Yep, 4 inches. Okay, I thought that made a pretty nice size cuff. And then I'm going to go ahead and make the width, let me see what I made the width to. Yeah, I think I did 5 3/4. That way I have a nice size seam allowance on the outside too. So there we go. I'm just going to tweak it to 5.75. So it's really a good thing to be able to switch back and forth in your settings page from metric to inches. And there's times when I want to see metric and times when I want to see inches. And this is definitely a time where I want to see inches. So there we have the size of our cuff. We're going to go back into our settings page, and I'm going to grab an outline. I'm just going to change the color. I'm going to touch the beaker, touch the line, and that's going to make it a straight stitch. I'm going to save it into the red pocket on the IQ side because we're going to use that area in a minute. So now we're going to touch next. We're going to go ahead and touch preview. We're going to go ahead and touch set and OK. And there it is on the embroidery side of the machine. So now we're going to touch add, and we'll go back into our IQ designer. And I'm going to touch the pocket with the blue arrow. Now we're going to pull it out of the IQ memory, the pocket, grab the little pocket. And you're going to notice in just a minute in the upper left-hand corner, now I'm going to choose that rectangle that I had just placed in the IQ memory a moment ago and touch set. Go into the settings page of our fill stitches, which is that second box. We'll grab that stipple, touch OK, highlight our little beaker in the fill area, and touch inside that rectangle. Okay, so we're going to touch next, excuse me, and now here we can also change the sizing. Again, I'm going to go back into the settings page, going back to metric, touching OK, going back to the spacing, and now I'm going to size the spacing for the cuff. Let's see what size I did it. Maybe a 7. Yeah, a 7. There we go. So there's the 7. And then once I'm decided that's what I want to do, I'm just kind of taking a look, going back and making sure I had a straight stitch there. And I want to make sure that I had set, did I set it to 7? Make sure you touch your set on your spacing for your stipple before you go forward. And go ahead and touch set. And okay, there we go. So now it's on the embroidery side of the machine. Alrighty, so we're going to need 2 of those. So I'm touching that little icon at the bottom is our selection tool, and I'm going to group the whole, the outline and the stipple. And you notice that I moved it with the move icon. That's very important. So now I'm copying it, and I'm going to choose move, and I'm going to go ahead and move it with these little arrows. Because I grouped it together, if I touch my stylus to the screen, it's going to separate those outline in the stipple. So I was very careful to just use the little arrow pads for my movement. And just notice I moved the, I kept one up higher and one lower, and we're going to stitch both of those inside our 8x12 frame. So the first thing that's going to stitch is an outline stitch or a placement stitch. We create our own placement stitch here for these little cuffs. There we go. Here's one. It's almost finished. And again, I'm sorry that the video is so fast, but I had so much area to cover when I did this video and had already edited it. I'm just talking fast. So if you missed something, just go ahead and back up and kind of look a little closer and see where I was touching here and there in the whenever we're designing a little bit. So now I'm just showing you that the next thing that you see in that right hand corner is the stipple stitch. So before we stitch that stipple stitch, we need to put a little bit of batting down, and there we go, place the batting down, smooth it out, and then I went ahead and chose some white cotton fabric to be the top of the cuff also. So I'm making sure I'm changing my thread back to whatever coordinating thread that you're going to use for your stipple on your cuff. And then we're going to go ahead and stitch that. And doing a size 7 in the cuff, it's actually smaller than the stippling that we did in the stocking itself. So it's really fun to be able to play with those different size stipplings. I do that all the time. So again, you can grab a hold and experiment with the different sizes for whatever project you're creating, and definitely use those different features because you can change them up to get different effects. And so I'm just stitching away the top cuff, and as soon as that finishes, we're going to do the second cuff. But this is just an easy way to design something. This is going to be one designer little stocking, right, from the stocking itself to the cuff. And I really love the way that stippling is a nice smaller stippling. It's going to give a little more extra texture and dimension. Very, very pretty. Alright, it's almost finished. Hopefully by now y'all are just really enjoying the process and thinking about all those stockings that y'all can create with this method. So there we go. Okay, so now I'm going to lower that presser foot and stitch it once again. And so the machine's going to stitch now an outline stitch. And I love whenever I do things like this, but I like having that outer line around the area because it's going to give me a nice line whenever I get ready to cut it apart, I'm going to use my rotary cutter, I'm going to use my rotary cutting ruler, and to get a nice accurate cut, I like to have that outline stitch around it because that way I can line it up with my ruler and cut it nice and accurate. So again, we're just going to go ahead and repeat this process. We're going to go ahead and stitch out the placement stitch, and I didn't worry about changing my thread this time. I went ahead and just left my white thread in there. I can pretty much see that outline clearly. Now we're going to the embroidery screen, and we're going to go into our fonts, and I'm going to choose my exclusive script, and I'm going to touch the M, and at the bottom I'm going to go to a medium size. That's going to make the font smaller. I'm going to choose my lowercase and then go ahead and complete the word Merry for Merry Christmas. And then once I do the Y, I'm going to touch my the little key on the right that looks like a little enter key, and that's going to throw the text down to the line below it. And then I went ahead and chose a capital C, and then went back to my lowercase to choose the rest of my letters for the word Christmas. So we're going to have Merry Christmas. And being able to choose the different size of the fonts as opposed to large, medium, and small, it's really a great feature to be able to do, so I thought the medium fit the best. Okay, so now what I'm doing here is I'm taking some embroidery tape, some colored tape, and I'm just going to line it along the edge of the stitch line on just one of our cuffs. And the reason why I'm doing that is because we're going to scan this in just a moment, and we're going to position our words. And since we're doing the fabric tone on tone, so the thread was white, the fabric was white, whenever I scan it, it's a little harder to really be clear on the area, and I want to center that Merry Christmas inside that cuff. So this is just an extra little Lori type visualizer. I started doing this method, this little technique, and I find that I use it in many circumstances. So again, we're just going to use it right here. So now you're going to watch. I'm going to go to the top of the screen. I'm going to touch the camera, and then I'm going to touch OK at the bottom of the screen, and it's going to scan what's in the hoop. It's taking a picture, so I love the fact that I have that camera capability on my Destiny because it allows me to do things visually as opposed to thinking harder because it makes it happen really easier. So you'll notice in the screen the scan shows the tape, and so now I'm just going to take the words and I'm going to move them down and just center them in the center of my cuff. It's as easy as that. I'm going to touch embroidery. There I'll see the words, and I'm going to slip over to my machine, and I'll probably change my color to a really pretty red. I think I already did that. And then I'm going to lower that presser foot, and I'm going to go ahead and stitch my words. So again, that tape's just a nice little trick that I've started using, a little technique that I found very useful. So again, whenever I'm scanning tone on tone, black on black, white on white, doing this little method, it just makes it so much easier to see. It just gives it a nice little, it shows you where that edge is going to stop and start. So again, we're just going to go ahead and we're going to stitch our words. If you want to put someone's name, or just some other fun words, maybe joyful or who knows, naughty or nice. You just never know. Whatever you want, however you want to customize that cuff, you have a creative license, so you get to put it. You get to put whatever you would like. I chose a red thread because that's going to just really pop off that white fabric, and that red's going to coordinate with the fabrics that I've chosen. So that's just going to continue to stitch along. Very, very nice and smooth. I love that elegant script. Lots of different fonts that you can choose, and if you have some favorite fonts of yours, I really encourage you to just pick whatever is your favorite font and go ahead and stitch those. Play with the different, maybe the different fabrics that you choose kind of will help you decide what font you might want to use. If you're being more playful in the fabrics that you've chosen, then maybe you can find a really fun playful font. There's even fonts out there that look like a Santa font, you know, that Christmas font. So you can definitely get creative with the fonts that you're going to use. So hopefully you're enjoying this and you're thinking about all the stockings that you can make. All of my friends that were actually in the class where we created this together, I hope you're enjoying having the video. You also said, Lori, when are you going to get this out so we can get some of these made before Christmas? So I'm hoping that y'all are going to enjoy getting these done before Christmas. And again, just have an easy way for you to create some personal gifts to give as gifts maybe, because it's always so much more special when you've made something for someone or they're getting something that you've made. I know I appreciate it. I do hear people say sometimes that, my hand gifts are not always appreciated, but you know what? There's a lot of people out there that really do appreciate it, so we don't want them to miss out. So there we go. We have that created. We're finished embroidering, so I'm going to touch OK and go back to my home screen and just go ahead and start taking it out of the hoop. I've taken that tape off. So let's see what we have here now. Oh, it's really starting to come together. Don't you love it when it starts coming together? So there it is. Okay, so here's our cuffs. So I'm going to grab my ruler and my rotary cutter. And what I'm doing is I'm cutting 1/4 of an inch outside that outer stitch line. So remember how it stitched that outside line? I'm just lining up my ruler to where when I cut, it's going to cut 1/4 of an inch seam allowance outside the stitch line. And I'm just doing that on all 4 edges. Nice and accurate. There's one. Now let's get our front. And then I went ahead and flipped this over. And a lot of times it is really easy, if you want to just go ahead and flip it over from the back side. And again, use that outer edge. Line up your 1/4 inch mark, and you're going to cut 1/4 of an inch outside that line on all 4 sides. I mean, these cuffs were so easy and fast. Fast, fast, and easy, easy. There we go. Boom, boom. There, we got it. Okay, so here we have, oh, the beautiful stocking. It's going to really start getting pretty. Just wait, it's going to start looking like a stocking in a few minutes. So there we have it. And I did kind of rush it. I threw this piece in my dryer for a little while, and I think it did shrink up just a little bit, but you know what? It all turned out okay. So again, I'm going to flip it over to the back side, and I can really see that stitch line. So now you're going to see me start taking my scissors and just cutting outside the stitch line. Just outside the stitch line. I'm not trying to leave a 1/4 inch seam allowance or anything like that, because if I do it like this, once I start stitching it together, I'll be sure that when I stitch it, I won't see any of those previous stitch lines there. So I'm just trimming it right outside the stitch line. it's going to stay together well, right? Because we've got all that stippling holding on together also. So I'm just coming around. Get your really good scissors. Got a few layers going on here. And there we go. Okay, so the front's trimmed. I think I'm going to flip that. Ooh, yeah, that looks nice. Okay, I'm starting to get really excited about this. Oh, it's looking so pretty. Yes, I love to pet my fabric, so you're going to see me pick that fabric up, pet it a little bit, look at it some more. Don't you like it whenever you do a project and it starts really coming together and you can start really seeing what you've been putting so much time into? So again, now we're just taking the back and I just flipped it over and I'm just going to trim outside that outer stitch line. You see, I used up that extra batting and it didn't matter a bit that it wasn't covering the whole hoop. There we go. Alright, so there's the back of our stocking. Easy. Front, the back. Here's the front cuff, the back cuff. Which one will it be? Okay, yes, that has to be the front, right? And there's your back cuff. Okay, so I'm going to ponder it and look at it and just kind of again, oh, okay, they're going to look so pretty once we put them together. Oh, yes, there we go. Looking nice. Yep, just love it when it starts coming together. I'll let you look at it for a minute there with me. Okay, so now I'm going to pull it over and I'm probably going to play with it a little bit more, look at it a little bit more. Okay, I just was so intrigued. Okay, let's have a close-up here. Now that the weaving is just really being the focal point. So pretty. Okay, once again, I'm just going to kind of put them together, layer it, look at it. In just a minute, I'm going to get busy and we're going to do something else, I promise. Okay. All right, another close-up little view. Oh, sweet. Oh, and look at that stipple and that weaving. It's just all coming together so nicely. All right, now we're going to have a little extra fun. Okay, so I took some red gingham fabric and I'm folding that over in a 45 and I'm just going to use my scissors to give it a kind of a little cut, a 45-degree cut, because we're going to make some piping. And this is kind of a habit of mine when I do when I need to get it started on a bias. I usually will fold that fabric over, give it a little angle cut. And now I'm going to cut a strip. I cut it 1 inch, but I'd recommend cutting about 1.25 inches to make it a little bit wider when you're doing the cording. 1 inch I love to do if I'm going to do like a petite cord. But if you're doing like a 5mm cord, I would recommend 1.25 inches. So again, I just needed 2 strips. So I'm just going to cut 2 strips here. Here we go. Piping makes everything so much more pristine. I mean, just it's going to look so much prettier with piping. So we're going to put piping on the bottom of these cuffs. And I'm just showing you here that the strip of fabric needed to be a bit wider than what the bottom of the cuff was. And so I'm going to take this over to my serger. I'm using my cording foot. This is my P5 foot. You'll notice that that foot has a little tunnel in the bottom of it. And so now we're going to slip that onto the machine. My machine is set up for just a 4-thread overlock stitch. So we're going to grab some cording. We're going to slip it underneath the presser foot. I like to have a bit of that cording sticking out the back of the foot. And once I have it underneath the tunnel, I'm going to lower the presser foot, and that's going to hold it in place. And then I'm going to take my fabric and place it underneath the cord, wrong side facing up if you have a fabric that has a right and wrong side. And then I'm just going to gently fold the fabric over, kind of have like a little cording sandwich, right? A little piping sandwich there. And I'm just wanting to make sure that the fabric stays taut over the cord. And then we're just serging it all the way down to create our cording. I'm just snipping it because my cording ran out, so I had all I needed. again, there is our piping, and then we'll go ahead and do the other piece also. Once again, I'm gonna raise the needles, raise the presser foot, slip the cording underneath the presser foot, and then lower it so it's gonna hold it in place. Slip the fabric underneath the cord, just sandwich it over, keeping the fabric taut, so we have a nice pristine cord. You don't want your fabric to slip to the left, or you'll have like a sharp fold. And that's why you see me with my finger. I'll just kind of pet the fabric over, making sure it's taut around the cord. But the presser foot, having the tunnel in it, is going to keep the cording right on track. There we go. So there's our cords, covered with our pretty gingham, so we've created our beautiful piping. And that's going to really make it look boutique as opposed to homemade. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and start putting our cuffs onto our stockings, and I'm going to do it on my serger. So once again, I still have my cording foot on, so I'm going to slip that cording that I've already created underneath the presser foot, and I'm just going to slide it towards the front, and then I'm going to grab my cuff and place it underneath the piping, right sides up, and you'll notice that I'm just going to align the right edges of the cording and the right edge of the cuff as I'm going along and serging that on. So there we go. We've got cording on one side of the back cuff. Now again, I'm going to slip it up underneath the presser foot, and I'm just going to allow the edge of the cuff to be sticking to the front of the presser foot. And so now I'm going to take the back of my stocking and I'm placing it right sides together. And again, I'm going to keep the edge of the cuff and the cording to the edge of the top of the stocking. So there it all came together nicely. How fast and easy is that? Okay, so now I'm going to grab the front. Now when you do the front, you're going to have to think, just kind of pay attention a little bit more, because now we have those words on the cuff and we don't want to serge that on, upside down. So the cording is under the foot. I'm going to slip the fabric, the cuff, up underneath the cording, and you'll notice that Merry Christmas, the cord is actually being stitched at the bottom where the words read. So the cord is being stitched below the word Christmas, so that's going to be trimmed underneath the cuff. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and slip that piping right back up underneath the presser foot. I also want to be careful here too to make sure that whenever I place this on, I'm placing it in the right direction to where the little foot part is going to curve to the right. Okay, so again, I'm putting it right sides together, and I'm just going to glide it through the serger. There we go, there we go. Look how pretty. So now we have the cord at the bottom, a really pretty little piped cuff. And so now we're going to go ahead and take it over to a pressing station, and we're going to do a little pressing. I trimmed off the extra cord. We'll do even a little extra trimming here in a few minutes, but I'm just kind of clipping off those extra little pieces there. I won't need those. And then I'm going to flip them and look at the seam allowances on the back side of the stockings. And what I want to do is I want to press the seam allowance on the front in the opposite direction that I'm going to press the seam allowances on the back. So whenever we sew them together, those will be in different directions. So you see I'm pushing one down, one up, one down, one up. And then I'm giving it a good little press there. Okay. That's just going to make a prettier seam when we're stitching them together. Okay, so all right, so now I've gotten my, this is my lining fabric. So we're going to line it with that holly fabric. I'm placing the stocking right sides together. So we're going to do this for both the front and the back. So now I'm going to grab the back of the stocking and place it again right sides together. And I'm just flipping the stockings themselves upside down because I have that fabric laying right side up. And I'm placing a few pins in there. And then I'll grab my scissors and then we'll cut out our lining. So you'll notice that the cuffs are a little bit, they're actually a little bit wider than what the stocking little bodies are. So I just trim the cuffs down to match the width of the stocking whenever I'm doing this part, when I'm trimming it out. Just very easy. Just a little bit of our cutting skills going on here. So just makes it very easy to use the stocking itself to cut out my lining, and I'll know that they'll be exactly the right size. I love doing this method. I do this a whole lot when I do different projects. If I need a lining, depending on what I'm creating, I'll create it, and then I'll use whatever I've created as my pattern piece for the lining that I'm going to use for that project. So there we have that all nice and cut. So we'll go ahead and cut the front out, and you're going to also see that I'm going to trim the top cuff down some to fit the width of the body of the stocking, because I wanted to make sure I had a little extra width on the cuffs, because I knew I could trim them down. Okay, see I have a little extra there, so I'm going to go back up. Kind of missed that. Okay, there we go. We got it now. Let me get that extra fabric out of my way, and then just go ahead and finish cutting it out. Very fast. Now we're getting close to where we're going to put them all together. Okay, we're almost there. All right, front, back, ready to go. Our linings are cut. Now we're going to the sewing machine. So now we're going to just take, I'm taking the back first, and I'm grabbing a scrap piece of the strips that we used, and I'm going to lay that on the back side of the cuff, and I folded it in half so you have those raw edges sticking out the top, and then I'm going to grab the top of the lining, and then we'll place some pins in there, and we're going to stitch all the way across the top edge of the back of the lining. So this is our back piece, and then I'm just going to lower my presser foot. I used probably a 3/8 inch seam allowance here. I wasn't real particular in my seam allowance. I just wanted to make sure that I was very consistent with what I did to the back. I was going to do exactly the same thing to the front. So I'm just going to go ahead and allow my fabric to lay right to the right edge of the presser foot, and that's going to be my seam allowance. I believe it is a 3/8 inch seam allowance. A 1/4 inch would have been too narrow, so I do have a larger than a 1/4 inch seam allowance going on here. Okay, and I gave it a little back tack when I started and when I stopped. So there we have that top edge. We have our little loop, so if you want to hang it on the mantle, it's going to hang nicely. And so now I'm just going to grab the front, and we'll place again the top edge of the lining to the top edge of the stocking, and we're going to sew that same seam allowance right across the top edge. A little back tack when I started. I'm going to take those pins out. Definitely not a good idea to stitch over those pins. There we go, and then we'll do a little back tack, and then we're going to pin it all together. Very nice. Okay, so it's almost finished. How pretty. So again, I'm going to just take it and put it right sides together. So the stocking front and back is going to be right sides together. And you'll notice that I have the lining off to the left, and so the lining front and the lining back is going to be right sides together. Now right here on this section, you'll notice because we pressed that seam allowance, one in one direction, one in the other direction, it's going to lay opposite of each other. So that's going to take that seam and help it not be so bulky. And I'm just coming around and just getting some pins in place. And do the same thing right there on that cuffed area. A lot of times I like to pin not exactly on the seam, but kind of before and after the seam, and that keeps it from shifting. Now the seam right here at the top is really, I really didn't need to oppose those seams. They actually could have just gone towards the lining, because those seams are both going to turn inside the little stocking when we finish, so that really wasn't necessary. So I'm pinning around, and you'll notice in the bottom of my little, the bottom of the foot of the stocking in the lining, I'm going to leave an opening right there. So I'm going to slip a pin right there, kind of space it out a little bit, and then I'm going to slip another pin, because this is going to be the area that we are going to flip our stocking. So you want to make sure that you have a bit of an opening. I'm guessing I had there about 6 inches is a good number. So there we go. We've got it all pinned together, and so we're going to go ahead and just take it over to the sewing machine. We're going to use that same seam allowance, and I'm going to start down at the bottom. Remember where we had the pins about 6 inches apart? We're going to lower that presser foot using the right edge of the fabric and the right edge of the presser foot to line up. That's going to be our seam allowance. And then we're going to go ahead and stitch all the way around. I have my pivot feature turned on because whenever I'm doing curves, I like my machine to stop with my needle down and my presser foot to come up, and that just helps me be able to tweak those curves a little bit easier. When you're stitching a curve, it's kind of a good thing to kind of tweak it, curve it ever so often, kind of close together if you want a nice curve. So you can just stop and you can move it just ever so slightly here and there. We're getting close, coming up to the curve again, the little heel. See how I've just kind of moved it a little bit, move it a little bit, move it a little bit, kind of stop, move it a little bit more. That'll give you a prettier curve if you just kind of take your time to just kind of maneuver those curves like that ever so slightly here and there. And sometimes it's even a better idea to take your stitch length down also when you're in those curves. Now this is a thick area, and I really didn't need to do that on the stocking. It did just fine. And on the lining, it's going to be on the inside of the stocking, so that's not going to matter a bit either. So here we go. We're getting close to the end. Oh, we have had so much fun. Thank you to all of y'all who have stuck with me through this whole wonderful project. Okay, we're getting there. Hopefully you have learned quite a lot of technique. If you have a Destiny, surely you've enjoyed some of the feature that you've gotten to use, so that's helped you a lot. And if not, hopefully you've picked up some tips along the way. Again, I'm just taking those pins out as I go. Get all that bulk out of the way and start curving around. Almost finished. There we go. And again, I'm being real careful to leave that opening. And you'll notice that I did back tack. I did a reverse stitch just to give a little more reinforcement, because we're going to be flipping that stocking out of that opening, and so it's always a good idea to go ahead and do a reverse tack before, right when you start and then right when you end. That way the force that's going to be on that area when we're flipping will be a little more secure. And so now I'm just going in with my scissors and I'm giving it a clip in the corners, in the curved areas. Now be careful not to clip your stitching, so I'm still making sure I leave enough room from the clip to the seam to where I'm not compromising that seam at all. But it's just necessary to give us a better curve in the a better turn when we curve it in the curved area, especially since we've got a lot of bump going on. Then I'm just going to go ahead and do a few little snips in the lining curved areas also. Okay, got it all clipped. So now we're gonna flip it. Won't this be fun? Okay, so we're gonna open it up. And you got some bulk going on here, so just be patient and just take your time. Just kind of see how I'm doing it here. I'm just gonna kind of work it up a little bit at a time. And then once it starts coming out, then I just kind of slip my hands on the inside and then just grab a little bit at a time and then pull it towards me. Grab a little more and pull it out. A little bit more. Oh, here it comes. It's coming together. There we go. And then you're going to notice I'm going to grab a point turner here in a minute so you can find your favorite point turner. This is one of my favorites, and I'm going to slip it up in the stocking and then just give it just kind of help it along the way to make that curve have a really pretty finish on all those edges. Coming together nicely. We just got to get it all helped along there. So those seams are going to lay nicely when we press them. And then I'm just using my hands to also just kind of tweak it a little bit here and there. And so now once we have the thicker part, I'm going to go ahead and adjust the lining the same way. Use my little point turner to get those curves out. And then you have an opening at the bottom. So the last thing we want to do is we just want to kind of tweak that those raw edges on the inside of the bottom of the little stocking lining, and you want to press it. Giving it a good little press will make it be nice and finished. So yeah, there we go. I'm going to grab my pressing station and give it a little press, and then I'm going to grab some pins and slip a few pins in there, and then we're going to take it back to our sewing machine, and then we're going to stitch that closed. There we go. Slip a pin here and a pin there. Back to the machine. Just do a little straight stitch. A little reverse tack. Sew straight down. And then do the same thing. We'll do a little reverse tack. Cut our threads. Now we're going to take and we're going to place the lining inside the stocking. Oh, I had a couple of stray threads there, so I'm just clipping those first. Got a little off camera there. Okay, so nice and finished. Great job. Okay, so now let's go ahead and get our lining inside our little stocking. And I just kind of take my time and shove my hand down in there and get that lining placed in there. Grabbing that little tool once again, trying to get a little more accurate in there. We all have our favorite notions. There we go. So now I'm just going to go ahead and position the top, get it positioned nicely. And I want to have a little bit of that lining fabric showing because I think that just is a nice little accent. Kind of makes a nice little pop there. I'll play with that a little bit and get it nice exactly the way I want it. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to press it again. Yep, there we go. And I bet you I'm going to grab a pressing cloth because I don't want to press on top of my words. Oh, yep, there I did. And I love using that little iron, but whenever I'm doing something really thick, I'm grabbing my large iron, and then that'll give it a little more stability there, a little more control. And then I'll probably flip it over, press the front of the stocking itself, and then flip it over and maybe press it from the back. There we go. Whenever you press something, it really, really does give it a beautifully a beautiful finished look. So pressing can really make something look so much more finished. So I definitely always encourage you to press as you go so you can have a much more finished product whenever you finished. It's just really going to take it from, again, a homemade look to more of a very expensive look. Okay, so look how pretty that is. Oh my goodness. We have had so much fun. I hope you have had fun, and I hope you're going to try to create some on your own. Look, 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 look. We've got it finished. So there it is, and I have it up against my Christmas tree. I already have my Christmas tree up. There it is. Look how pretty. You can incorporate the Christmas colors with your tree and then have a beautiful designer stocking.